Hello, friends. I'm no therapist, but I'm your host, Stephanie Goodman. I'm a wife, a mother, a grandmother, and a woman of faith. Often friends ask me how I have a successful marriage while blending families and staying optimistic in life. This podcast features people with real-life stories about success in relationships and triumph over trial. Kels and I take a tender walk down memory lane and pay tribute to our mothers and their example in our lives. Hello and welcome to another edition of I'm No Therapist, but today we're going to focus on the love of our mothers. Being a special occasion that this is, being Mother's Day, we wanted to take some time to share some of the traits that we love about our mothers. And I have with me my special guest,
Ta-da!
My husband, Kels Goodman.
Oh my goodness. It's Stephanie, it's just so good to be here. It's been so long.
It has been so long.
So long. I think the last time we did a podcast was with the Tykerts.
Mm-hmm.
But then before that, the first time you and I have even done one here is right now, because the rest of them have been upstairs in our other room.
This is true. We haven't done a podcast recording.
That's right.
Here in this room ever.
Yeah. So this is the first time we actually have done it in this room. So this will be different. And nobody knows that I'm switching. My hand is right here, and I'm switching. See that? Isn't that great? It's a secret.
No need to pay attention to the puppeteer's work.
Don't see the man behind.
Right
Here.
It's like a ventriloquist, only for the podcast. Huh?
That's right. So it's like, hello, I'm speaking, and then I point over here, and then it's
hello,
Stephanie.
I'm speaking.
So anyway, it's just kind of special. We're going to make this work. It's going to be awesome. But we had to talk about Mother's Day.
Yeah, we did.
Which is wonderful.
Yeah. So I feel that a mother's influence in the homes is so, so valuable. I love the quote that if you change a woman, her life, then you change a whole generation. Do you understand what that quote means?
Is that because it has to do with a woman becoming a mother, and then the influence that she has on her children?
Yes. Yeah. With our mothers, we were very fortunate to be able to have strong examples of, in my opinion, the kind of person that I want to be. I remember growing up, my dream was to be a children's book illustrator and a mother, a stay-at-home mom. And I attribute a lot of that to the very fact that I had a stay-at-home mom who was available to me anytime. If I was sick and they needed to call home, I didn't have an empty home. You know, I was always able to find my mom, and sometimes I just needed to be able to hear that she felt sorry for me, you know?
Yeah. Oh yeah. So I know that feeling. I think that my mom was kind of the same thing. I was very lucky that my mother was always at home. Mm-hmm. And my dad worked, my mom stayed at home. And while a lot of people kind of make fun of that traditional way of doing things to a degree, that's actually, in my opinion, the best way to raise a family, is that a mother is there nurturing the best they can. So when the kids come home, there's mom.
Yeah.
Not that that's bad. Not that it's bad to have, two working parents or whatever, mm-hmm. because things happen and you have to readjust. So.
And it depends on where you are in life if you need to be able to have a second income. But before we dive into that, I want to go back and kind of introduce to our audience where I fit in my family and where you fit in your family.
Okay.
So I'm the oldest of 4 in my family. I was born in 1975, and all of our siblings are 2 years apart. So You can do the math if you want to.
That means Stephanie's 29.
Yeah.
Dang. That's pretty
So
good.
I have two
for
younger
29.
sisters and one younger brother, and that's what consists of our immediate family. My mother and father have been married for 40, let's see, how old am I? So 48 years.
48.
Yeah,
Holy cow.
they'll be coming up in 48 years.
That's
And I was born 9 months later, but also I was born a month early.
it sounds like your parents were ready to have kids right away.
They did. They had they had kids right away, even if they weren't expecting it. And my mom tells a funny story that she was helping to clean a church, and she just wasn't feeling good. Just wasn't feeling good, and somebody said, "You might be pregnant." She thought, "What? I didn't even think about that." Sure enough, she was expecting, and I'm sure that was hard on my dad too, because he just got married and now he's having to go into a new space of being a father and hoping to be able to care for that child and to provide a lifestyle and what have you. I'm sure that was difficult on him, and maybe we can go into that a little bit with you. But tell us where you fit in your family.
Well, I'm the youngest of 7. So I have 6 siblings, 4 of which that are alive.
Yeah.
And we've talked about the passing of my brother and my sister, I think, in previous podcasts. But so I was the youngest, and my parents are still married, still the same. Well, they've passed away since, but they were married right up until they passed away. And they one of the things a lot of people dream of is that they passed away very close to each other. They died 3 weeks of each other.
Well, we decided it was like 26 days.
Yeah, about 26 or 27, something like that. Yeah, so it was very close, which we kind of we realized that was such a blessing to do it that way. And
no, it's such a story too.
Yeah,
it makes me wonder how our story will turn out with situations like that. How long will I have you on this earth to myself, or vice versa, and will we pass close to each other? Because to be honest with you, everybody dies, right? This is our life experience.
I'll go first. So
is that right?
Just kidding. It doesn't matter. Whatever it is whatever it is. It's weird thinking that. It's actually weird really thinking of when I go versus when she goes. You just kind of have to be prepared for whatever and be happy with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also, this being that we have Mother's Day here, and I'm so fortunate to still have my mother here, that I want to be able to take this time and share my love with her. I'm so grateful that, we have a friendship. And I know that that's rare to be able to have in a relationship. I grew up in a home where my mom was there by my side, my best friend. She was always there listening to my wodems. And sometimes she would be there till 2 o'clock in the morning, just listening to me, even if she was halfway falling asleep. I knew that she cared because she was there for me. And I'm so, so blessed and so grateful to be able to have had that kind of experience and example. And I know that as I grew up and I got to know more of my friends, I realized that they don't all have that kind of experience in their lives.
Yeah, and I'm probably in that boat where not necessarily negative, like my relationship with my parents wasn't negative. It was never negative. In fact, I respected them, and I, because I was never one to get into trouble, I think that made it, I was okay to talk to them about things.
Yeah.
But I also know that my parents seemed considerably older for me.
Yeah.
Especially my dad. My dad was probably, I think he was close to 40 when I was born. And so by the time I was at an age where it was time to play ball or it was time to do things, My dad was busy. He was, and I get it. He was, by the time I was in that teenage years, he was in his 50s. And here I am in my 50s, and I'm working harder than I ever have. I've spent a lot of time, working on the projects I do, and mostly because I'm racing for time. So I'm sure my dad, in his growing up, was racing for time. But my mom was basically the one that I think I had a better relationship with. And because she was always there. So I have some good memories of my mom. I can't wait to share a few of them today.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and also I want to go into a space where I am now at an age where I'm recognizing, especially being a new grandma, right? Where I'm recognizing that motherly influence throughout my life. And it wasn't necessarily just my mom. I'm very, very blessed to be able to have had my mother at my side. But there are some other women in my life that have been nurturers and examples of the kind of person that I want to be as a mother or a motherly influence to others. Do you have some people in your life as you look back that you would say were kind of a motherly influence in your life?
Yeah, actually, I think one that I can think of is family, the Spence family.
Yeah.
The Spence family was a family that I knew in Texas in my teenage years, and they had teenage kids, and we were all in the same youth group at church in Texas. And then they moved to Utah, and then I moved to Utah. And so almost around the same time. And so I kind of would go to their house often and just hang out. And I felt like Marina, who's their mother,
Yeah.
was always kind of another mom for me. She's very sweet, and she's always supportive of whatever I did, and I enjoyed that.
So what makes a motherly influence?
Well, I mean, first off, they're a mom, but you don't necessarily have to be a mom.
Yeah.
But that just helps, you don't have to be a mom to have a motherly influence. I think there's a lot of women that I've known that are nurturing, but they just either they couldn't have kids or they never got married. So it's not necessarily being a mother makes you the nurturer, but I know that it helps because you've already had the experience of being up late at night, of taking care, having to, change the diapers, having to nurture. So there is an experience there that helps that person who's never been a mother that they understand, especially when they get into the age of being, teenagers, because those teenagers really, man, the things that the teenagers go through. And so a mother who has been a teenager before can understand, even though there's a generational gap there sometimes. I feel like my mom was a generation before me. My mom was in the era of listening to big band music and not really much for entertainment beyond that I at least know of.
Now, is this Lawrence Welk era? And
yeah, or
is
even
that big band?
even before then, or something like that. Just the older, Chattanooga Choo Choo kind of stuff, that I would never listen. Well, I might listen to it today. Who knows? But
Isn't that funny?
But it's yeah.
But that was so old
That was
fashioned.
so
at that
old
time.
fashioned. I mean, in my era, it was Star Wars, and my
Yeah.
parents could not relate to Star Wars, and so because they couldn't relate to Star Wars, we were very gapped.
Yeah.
There's a big gap, and that wasn't negative. That wasn't necessarily negative. It just meant that it's like, I'm sure kids today listen to music or watch movies that I don't totally connect with, and I find myself in my age now doing the sitting on the lawn telling the kids to get off my lawn kind of era, and
Oh
I'm
yeah,
trying.
I haven't seen this cranky side of you.
See, isn't that great? That's so great. So, but no, but I think with that gap there, it's nice when there is a mother that can relate, and so
Yeah, and I feel fortunate that I was able to grow up in a small town, and right across from this cinder block driveway was my grandma.
Ah,
I
yes.
would go and spend ample hours with her, and I don't know if I and I don't know about you, but I found that doing housework for grandma was much more fun than doing housework in my own home.
What? No, no. That's. I thought that you just liked doing it in your own home, right?
She taught me. She taught me about the importance of music, of storytelling. I remember her reading all kinds of rhymes, fables and rhymes to us, and teaching us a little bit on the piano, and sharing with us like Lawrence Welk and different things, but also the exercising. I remember her exercising, and I loved to show off during my exercising time because I was flexible then. And I loved to hear grandma say, "Oh, Stephanie, don't get old. It hurts too much." I'm starting to learn a little bit about the wisdom of what she was talking about at that time, but also the importance of serving others and having food and just being there for the family. We served each other, and we had birthdays with her, we had Christmases with her. Uh, she was a very strong motherly influence in my life. And I'm very grateful that I get to have my grandma right next door.
Well, yeah, that's fortunate. My grandmother, my mom grew up in Southern California, San Bernardino, and my dad grew up in Washington D.C., which is totally the other side of the nation.
Uh-huh.
And then when I'm 10, we all moved to Texas, South Texas. So we're like smack dab in the middle. So we're far away from either family member.
Oh.
And
And this was before you could really interact with them except maybe letters
yeah,
and phone calls were expensive, right?
yeah, phone calls were you paid by the minute and for long distance. And I think that that was about it. That was about the extent of it. So like my grandmother on my dad's side was I never really got to know her very well. I'd seen her maybe 3 or 4 times in my whole life and see
Mm-hmm.
pictures of her, and that was the extent of it. I would
Wow.
probably saw her more, but I just never knew. I
Huh.
couldn't remember because by the time we moved to Texas, I was 10, and so we didn't actually get back to Virginia maybe once or twice until she passed away.
So she had the name of grandma, but you really didn't know her.
Yeah, yeah. She seemed like very, very old to me.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was already seemed old. Then she seemed very old, and then she died early. She died when I was in my probably late teens, I think.
So did you have a grandmother like figure that you looked up to?
Um, Not that I can remember. Now, my grandma on my mom's side, I did get to know her better, and the reason why is that every winter, probably after Christmas, we'd get through Christmas, and they would come to Texas and stay for probably a good 2 or 3 weeks and just hang out with us. And they had a motor home, so they drove down,
No.
and so while it was still cold up there, it was warm where we were, and so they were used to driving the long distance. And sometimes they brought my aunt, my mom's sister Pat, and so Patricia and her husband would come down, all four of them,
Mm-hmm.
and they'd hang out with us for the winter. And so so that way I was closer to my what her last name was Machman, so it was Grandma and Grandpa Machman from Southern California, and then eventually they passed away in the 90s. By that time I'd already moved out and everything. So I kind of my favorite memory of that is playing Yahtzee.
Mm.
So Yahtzee was the Goodman slash Machman game that you play.
That's
So
interesting that you brought that up because in my family, it was something called Pollyanna, which is very similar to the game Sorry
yeah,
or Yochizi. Oh goodness, I don't remember.
Parcheesi.
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 Yeah.
Steph, you're so Parcheesi. I'm telling you. Just kidding.
And Domino's. Those are pretty prominent in my family.
That's fun.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So that's interesting to realize how different your life and your experience with motherly influences is in my life. Because I had family that was very close. I grew up with the family. I grew up with my cousins. I went to school with them and had my aunt and uncle there. But my grandma, on my mother's side of the family, she lived 2.5 hours away. And I remember how badly I wish I could just pop in to her home and not have that long travel all the way up to see grandma's house. But she was always one that allowed herself to be invested in our life. She taught me about storytelling. She taught me about singing fun songs. She was one who, like my dad, I don't know if you've watched episodes with my dad yet, but like my dad, you have to be very mindful of the words.
Yeah, those are episodes that are coming soon. I think this will be released before. But yeah, Stephanie spent some time talking to her dad, and that'll be coming out, in the next few weeks, I think.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Well, I think that my experience with my mother, the thing to remember is I'm the youngest of 7. I had a sister that died, and then I had a brother that died. And that it was through that time that my dad started giving her the term, the great mom. So the great mom was always that term that everybody called her, even up to her dying day. She was always the great mom. So
I remember being introduced to her as the great mom as well. And I immediately picked up on that energy.
Yeah, and she was very humble. She was not one that really worried about, comparing herself to other people. And it's funny because my dad, he did pretty well financially, but he didn't always show it. And my mom was in the same. She didn't have all these demands or anything, at least that I'm aware of. But the other thing also that I remember is that I had 4 siblings, and all 4 got married in 13 months. So is that like crazy or what? They're in 13 months. From I think it was December 79 was Tom. And then March of 1980 was Connie. And then the summer of 1980 was Pam. And then in December of 1980 was Bob. I think that's or it may be shifted a year. Maybe it was 80 to 81. But either way, it was literally a 13-month period. It was like boom, 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 boom. And when that happened, that had me as a 13-year-old. Now I went from having several kids living in my house to my house all alone. So it was just me and my parents. And so during those last few years, from about 13 till my graduation, during those 5 years, my parents, I think they couldn't wait for me to leave. I think they were just like, okay, we're going to go live like we're empty nesters now. So hurry up, get the raising going on, get it all figured out, and we're waiting for you to leave. I'm just kidding. They weren't totally like that. In fact, I turned down a few trips with my parents. They wanted to go to Epcot when Epcot was brand new.
Oh.
And I totally turned down Epcot.
Disney
Can you believe
World?
that? Yeah, I turned it down because I wanted to stay at home and work on my movies. I was a dreamer, and so if you're gone, good. I got some time to make my movies with my dog and my friends. So that was I don't know.
The teenage brain, huh?
Yeah, totally. But I had that separation with my parents. It wasn't negative. It was just I was busy, and so I don't think I really started to note the value of my parents until I, of course, like many people, until I became a parent
Yeah.
myself.
Right. And I can appreciate that. Share with me, what did you learn from your mom when she was faced with hardships and trauma?
Well, she was definitely a believer in God. She was definitely a faithful. Both my parents were very faithful in their faith, and so I learned that no matter what the adversity was, she stuck to that. She had an answer for everything as to why something might have happened.
Mm.
I still remember also late one night while we're in Texas, and I'm probably about 13 by this time. And we lived in a corner in a pretty, like it wasn't the nicest neighborhood, but it was a decent neighborhood. And in this small town in Texas. And we lived on a corner where teenage kids would always swerve and they would drive too fast and then they eventually would wreck in front of our yard. And so you can see that the marks a lot to the point to where they had to put those dots, these little dots in the middle to help slow, the little blah 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 blah
Oh,
dots.
the bumps,
Yeah,
the speed bumps.
the speed. Yeah, they're like speed bumps, but they're just like dots that have a, what do you call it, like a
Oh, they make
glowing.
the sound.
No, they have like a glowing thing to it, like the shirts construction where people wear, so
Reflective.
that they reflective. That's the word.
Yeah.
That's the big word. It's reflective. Anyway, so they have these little round reflections that they put in the middle of the street so that it forced them to have to slow down.
Wow.
And so because they kept driving so quickly around that corner, and they would, and so one time there was actually a wreck where there was real, like, people hurt, and so they hit this huge rock, which was of course some of you who are listening, you can't see my hands, but it's a big rock that's probably the shape of like a little nightstand or something, maybe even a little bigger. And so it's very thick rock, and it had been hit by the car, and even when the tow truck came to lift the rock off the ground, it couldn't lift it. Like the back of the tow truck was coming up.
Wow.
But they would hit it and hit it off of our yard and onto the street. And so, and I remember hearing banging. I was asleep, and I hearing banging at the door of somebody who was hurt. And so my mom brought her in, let her sit down. She was bleeding. There was drips of blood all the way, to where she was sitting. And then my mom would call and get an ambulance, obviously, and get the police there. And the woman, I remember I was asleep, and I woke up and poked my head in, and I could see her at a distance. I thought it was a dream. I thought it was like some kind of weird nightmare. And so mom just took care of it. And that was just the way mom was. I mean, mom didn't care who it was. She just took care of everybody that had a need.
Non-judgmental.
Yeah, non-judgmental towards it, and just did whatever she could.
Yeah. My mother was very similar to that. She wears that title of, if she had a shirt and you needed it, she'd give you the shirt off her back, right?
Yeah.
She loves you no matter what you've gone through. She knows that we all have trials in life, but underneath, she loves the pure child that you are.
Yeah. Oh, I agree with that. So I having known your mom, she is super sweet.
Yeah, so. She is. So I want to share a memory with you. One that, sometimes you go through experiences, and some of those experiences really change your world, right? I was in 8th grade, and I awoke to an ambulance outside of my home. And immediately, I actually thought it was my dad that they came for. And when I realized it was my mom, I remember being in shock and awe, because my mom could do nothing. She was superhuman. I never saw her really sick or anything like that, to a point where an ambulance would be picking her up.
So you saw that she could do nothing wrong. That there
Correct.
was nothing wrong with her. She would always be there.
Yeah.
Yeah, for forever.
Right. And so for an ambulance to be outside of my home, it was it was shocking to me. I didn't know why or what happened. And I remember going to school that day and just not being able to focus or concentrate because I had no answers. I had no idea what was going on. I learned later on that my mom had been experiencing small seizures, and I had never seen that. My sweet little brother, and I don't know how old he was, he knows how old he was, experienced one of my mother's grand mal seizures.
Oh wow, that had to be hard to see.
Absolutely. I'm sure that it was life changing for him to see this woman who's his protector and nurturer to be at a vulnerable space of having a grand mal seizure is that would be hard to see. And we learned after a series of different tests and what have you that she actually had kind of a blood clot in her head that had been caused from earlier trauma that she wasn't aware of. And that was the reasons for her seizures. And so they decided to go and do surgery. Uh, I remember how vulnerable our family was at the time and feeling like we didn't know if she was going to come home. We didn't know what the turnout was. We were told by my dad that the doctor did say that because they're going into her brain, there's a high chance that she may not be coming home. And that was really hard to hear.
That had to be very difficult to think because she's the staple, you know. And
Absolutely.
so for that to be loosened and taken out, it's like, oh my goodness.
Right. Yeah. So we did what is a practice in my faith, which is fasting, whereas you release yourself from eating and you really focus on that connection that you have from God and your prayers and call on angels and miracles or what have you to be able to gift their presence in your life, to give you comfort, or if it's possible to have a miracle, right?
Yeah.
So our family fasted, and I also remember the congregation that we were part of fasted. And it was a miracle that my mom recovered the way that she did. When she got out of her surgery, I remember I'd never seen her hair shaved before, and I'd never seen uh, big staples in someone's head like that,
Oh,
you know?
I bet that was weird to see her with was she completely bald?
She was shaved down, and I don't remember if it was completely bald. It feels like it was maybe just part of her head that was shaved.
Yeah.
I have to confirm that with my mom to find out if it was fully shaved or not. But I do remember it being shaved and that feeling like violation to me. Like, who shaved my mom's beautiful hair? It was hard for me. But she came out of her surgery and she had to learn how to talk, how to walk,
Wow.
how to use the right side of her body again. And even still, right now, she doesn't have full feeling in a certain side of her body. And sometimes she can't hold on to things.
Yeah.
But she never, ever, ever complains about that.
Yeah. I never hear her even talking about it. I forget that that even happened.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
But that was a tender, tender time for me in realizing how quickly my mother could have gone. Uh, she shares an incredible story that she remembers distinctly being given a verbal offer that she could go home,
Wow.
but she chose to stay here. She felt that she wanted to make sure to see her children be raised into adults. And we are definitely there.
Yeah.
And now we're bringing grandkids into her life, and we're so grateful that we get to treasure those moments with her. And I feel like it's moments like that really open up our heart to appreciating what we have in our lives.
Yeah, I remember I could probably go into a little bit of when my mom had cancer, and when you go into the C word, that's just like, oh boy,
Yeah.
and so my mom didn't, she had cancer probably about age 70, and it was ovarian. And so for several years, and it was a good thing that my parents had thus moved to Vegas, because then they can be near my sisters who were both
Right.
there.
They moved from
So,
Virginia.
yeah, they moved from Virginia to Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
And while they're in Vegas, they can be taken care of because they live near. Whereas when they were living in Virginia, well, just as a quick history, my parents, we moved to Texas, and then in the late 90s, my dad retired and moved back to Virginia. And so, but kept the business in Texas going. But so while they're in Virginia, they're living on 10 acres, and they were there for about 10 years, and then just decided it was time to live near family, because none of us were living near them. All of us were in Texas and Utah and Vegas. So they moved to Vegas, which was kind of a middle ground. And literally once they moved to Vegas, my mom, like, not like, it wasn't, I don't think it was even a year, and she contracted cancer.
Yeah.
And during those, that's when I would probably say I started to see her in a vulnerable spot where she was not the superhuman, that she was, even though she was already older. She was already older, but this was one of those moments where you're like, oh, it's not forever here on earth. And so to see her go through that pain, and then of course she went through several rounds of chemo, and then she healed her cancer for a short while by doing it naturally, but then it came back with a vengeance, and then she passed away.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that was an incredible time when she allowed herself to go into a natural treatment and was able to gain her eyesight back. I saw her hair grow in, beautiful and silky, and she'd lost a lot of weight, and she just looked vibrant.
yeah, oh yeah, that was pretty amazing for that short moment where she was very healthy.
Yeah.
But
I remember us all going out to dinner and her being very particular about what she allowed herself to eat. And I'm sure that was so difficult.
yeah, I think that was kind of depressing after 70 years of eating, 75 years or so of eating one way,
Mm-hmm.
and then having to be forced to eat a salad, and that's the extent of it.
So I'm grateful that we have had good, wonderful women in our lives, and that they did what they could to have a friendship with us. I think that that's a really important thing in being a mother in the world, and service, the way that they served and sacrificed. How grateful we are for that example. My question for you is, when you were seeking for, because you've been married before, when you were seeking for another relationship, here we are, you've got 2 boys, and you know that you want an influence in their life. Did you look to your mother's example to be something that you wanted in your own life?
Oh, definitely. I think my mother was a great example, and obviously there's differences because of our age gap. But as far as caring, and as far as being able to, desiring to love without guile, to be able to, not be biased to who you are, that was, yeah, my mom was definitely the example. And so when it came to searching again, well, you were obviously, I can't say that you're totally like my mom,
Yeah.
but I know that in a lot of cases, because you guys get along, got along really well is why it made it a shoe-in. It was pretty easy. And so, because, my mom had that laid back thing, that laid back lifestyle of just being able to, whoever
Just
came
love on
in,
you.
she just loved you no matter what, and try to get to know you no matter what.
Yeah.
And when you have, when you have that kind of trait, then it becomes easy to be able to, to be friend, to bring in whoever you need to in the home. And I think my mom and dad, they both had that kind of feeling of anybody could come in the house and feel loved. And that is definitely a trait that I wanted to make sure we had while we, when we would get married and start our own home.
Yeah.
That we invite whoever, so they can feel the love. We're strong enough that anybody could come in, even if, no matter what kind of person they are, and they can hopefully feel the love in our home. And a lot of that's, attributed to the great mom. So
I love that. I remember when I met your mom for the first time that you flew me out to Virginia, which
yeah,
I hadn't been out of the state of Utah in a long, long time,
yeah.
and
And we
especially
were
not
already
out
married a
east.
year, so that was pretty bad. Yeah, because we ran off and got married, like you see in the other podcasts
Right.
that we talked about
But
that.
meeting your mom for the first time, it was so powerful to me because I didn't feel like I met her for the first time.
Yeah,
Your parents were so incredible in welcoming me into their life that it felt like a reunion.
yeah. And it made it so easy. And what was awesome is I was having gone through the previous marriage and being afraid when I presented you to my parents. I was not afraid at all. I was very confident that I knew that we would have their blessing no matter what. So that was pretty helpful.
And what are some of your memories of meeting my mom for the first time?
Your mom was very sweet, and I don't remember details. I just remember going to your house and feeling very relaxed. Like, oh, there's Stephanie, go have fun, or whatever, whenever I'd pick you up on a date. Or yeah, but I had never had a negative experience with your mom whatsoever. So I'd never really, you know, she was always sweet. And she always, loved me just like one of her sons. I mean, she really was always very friendly.
Yeah.
So that was
And
very,
she always has a bite to eat.
yeah,
And she always opens her home and offers it no matter what. And and she's always full of compliments and hugs and loves.
yeah. So what would you say, Stephanie, that to send away for this Mother's Day, because obviously this is a Mother's Day
Mm-hmm.
episode, how, talk to your audience, wrap this up with talking to them about what they need to take away for Mother's Day. I know for me, I at least say that being a mother, I'm not. I have no. I mean, I do a lot of motherly things around the house, but I've never gave birth, and I haven't changed a diaper in years, and I mean, that's going to change probably because we have grandkids now. We have a grandkid and another on the way,
Yeah.
but I think that there's a forgotten trait of being a mother, I think, in our society. I really believe that we have taken I can understand why there is a whole day set aside for a mother, because we have taken the motherhood mentality and we've made it like an official title. We've almost made it political. We've almost made it a thing where it's not that nurturing love as much as it used to be, and it needs to stay that way because that's, the mother's job has been eternal.
Yeah.
It's been like this since the dawn of man. We've had mothers since the very beginning.
This is true.
So,
Yeah. Well, I want to be able to say I'm so grateful for the example that my mom has been. Like I said, she's my best friend. We tease that we were best friends in heaven before we came here, and the only way for us to be able to stay as close as we needed to was to be mother and daughter. And I love that she shares that kind of story with me. And that's the kind of person that I want to be, especially moving into this next chapter of being a grandma. I want my children to know that I cherish their children and that their children cherish me, and that we have good, strong memories, stories, crafts, songs, going places together, and that I do my part as my mother did of being an example. I love the quote that God couldn't be everywhere, so he created mothers.
That's a good quote. I can totally see that. I can understand that.
Yeah. So for your Mother's Day, whether you have a mother that's still here, whether you have a mother that you need to work on, maybe forgiveness, or maybe that you're not close to your mother, choose some time to be able to recognize someone who maybe was a motherly influence, and give them your gratitude. Thank them for the example that they've been in your life. And to my mother, thank you. Thank you for being by my side, for helping me through some really dark times, for offering your home to me, for loving my children, for accepting my husband into the family the way that you have, and for the way that you just love on all of my friends and family. Thank you for your example.
If you've enjoyed this episode, remember to subscribe, share, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Instagram. Please comment, because I would love to hear about what you think and what you want to see in the future. I'm no therapist, but I am your host, Stephanie Goodman.